All right, the next opportunity we have tonight is from Plant Moran Cressa. It's an update. So I think Robert's here. So Robert.
Thank you, Dr. Niehaus. I'm here today to give you a quick update of where we're at with the bond program that we've been working on. We met with the Grosse Pointe administration last week, and we started talking about the procurement of the architects for this engagement if the bond is successful. We also went over the bond scope and the phasing and also the construction delivery method. There's several ways of delivering a school bond program, whether it's general contracting, construction manager agency, or construction manager at risk. And we all decided that the best approach to this would be construction manager at risk. And the reason being is that there's only one contract being held rather than multiple contracts, and also one bond. With agency, there's multiple bonds required for that delivery method. And the school district would hold all of the subcontractors' contract. So it's a better method of one point of responsibility for the district, and we felt that that was the best approach for this engagement. The upcoming week, we'll be talking with Clark Hill about the AE contract and getting that that draft squared away so that we can add that to the RFP for architects, which will be issued probably the first week of October. That process will take approximately 2 to 3 weeks. We'll shortlist architectural firms for this engagement and then have interviews and then a recommendation going forward.
Any questions? Just further comment, a couple of further comments for Robert. First and foremost, when we met with them last week, you also brought another gentleman with you that talked about when should we be planning for next summer's work.
Correct.
And he said last April or March or April. And so if we are successful in the bond, then having an architect employed and beginning to do the design work, there would be no fees. There would be no fees if the bond doesn't pass.
Correct.
So there's nothing for us to worry about with regarding design fees or other fees that may be accumulated. Unless it passes, they basically don't have a job or there isn't a job there. So the contingency in the contract says we have to pass the referendum for this to happen. But if we don't start a planning process currently with our architects and then ultimately with our construction managers, there's no way in the world we're going to have any work or much work that we'll be able to complete in the summer of 2019. So the idea behind this is that most of the work that we talked about that day would be done at the high schools. And so we talked about whether it's one high school or two high schools, whether we have one construction manager or two construction managers. Some of that detail is still yet to be determined, but some of the other pieces of this is the board needs to begin to have the mindset of what it would be like if it passed and what preparation we would need to have in place for us to be able to go out for construction bids. We also found out that when we weren't in cycle and we weren't bidding at the right time of the year, we got some really high numbers on our secure vestibules. And so if we don't have something that is going to market about the time that the contractors are looking for their summer work, we'll also be backed into that same corner again where we have minimal or less contractors. So the idea behind this would be simply to, as you said, shortlist a group of architects. There would be a committee that would be involved in the selection of the architects. There would be board member representation, there would be administrative representation, and then just like always, we would do it in the format that John does in HR. There would be interviews conducted, there would be resumes, there would be all of the things that we'd normally look at. But it would also give us an opportunity to look at and know what the architectural fees would be. And so we have forecast in our bond and also in our costs what our architectural fees would be. And by securing an architect and securing those fees or getting those fees in as best favor of us as possible, it gives us an opportunity then to look at the numbers and to look and see if this is something we really want to do. The other piece of this, as we talked about, was the factor that there's two series in this bond. There's a series that takes off early in 2019, and then there's the 2022. Would you want the same architect, or could the same architect do both of those phases, since it's going to be phased over 4 to 6 years? And I think the advice or the thought that we had is potentially okay if we went in that direction to have one architect. But we also, if we wanted multiple, we could also divide it, and we talked about a number of different ways to do so. So what I wanted to do tonight is allow the board to understand and know what the process would be for us to get a timeline together to be able to select an architect that would come aboard probably around the mid-November, early December timeframe, and then would work forward in getting us planned and ready for the summer of 2019.
Right. And I think the way that we set up a timeline for the AE procurement, it is possible that potentially we could have a recommendation at the last board meeting of October if everything falls into place. It's all really predicated on getting the approval of the draft contract for the architect, which we always like to include in the RFP when we issue it, so they have time to review it and take any exceptions to it perhaps. So that can be ironed out early on so it doesn't drag out the whole entire process. But that's really the wild card, I guess, in the procurement is getting agreement with that contract and moving forward. As far as the scope of projects that could most likely occur during 2019, if there's a successful bond passage, we think that maybe some additional secured vestibules, maybe getting a jump start on some IT needs, and also perhaps roofs or parking lots, depending on what the architect's input is on the scheduling of those components. So we have a rough idea of what might occur in the next 3 to 4 years going forward, but we would like the architects to engage and give their input as well.
Mr. Ismail?
A number of questions for Mr. Stempien, if I could. First of all, you've recommended, as I'm hearing, you're recommending a construction manager at risk as the method?
That's correct.
Of delivery? Okay. And the reason is because of the singular bond? Is that the primary driving factor, or are there other factors?
A single bond, single contract with the district, rather than have multiple contracts with subcontractors, which gets a little bit messy. Pay applications could be very numerous. This kind of streamlines the whole procurement.
And are the contracts that we accept from these at-risk construction managers, are those going to be lump sum? Is that the goal for each of these projects?
Yes.
Okay. And then are we going to receive, with their bid package or with a response to certain packages that you put out there, are we going to receive a breakdown by sub-trade?
Yes.
Yes. We are. Okay. Then with regard to the RFP for the architect, is it your recommendation that we have one architect for everything or multiple architects?
We're still in discussions with that. It's a matter of, I would recommend no more than 2 for this engagement because of the nature of the work. If you boil down the cost of work out of the entire bond program, that's construction costs, it's about $70 million. Okay. So it's in that ballpark, and it's spread over a duration of 4 to 5 years. So if you look at it in more concise components, the work could be handled by one architectural firm. But really, we have to look at their workload. I mean, that's a big factor. There's several things that we'd like to examine as far as determining what architect we should go with. And one of them is workload. And as you know, with the construction climate right now, everybody's busy. Yeah. We want to make sure that they're capable of handling this amount of work that we look forward to in the next 5 years.
And in the proposal that you gave, we used as the basis for the bid, the $111 million, what percentage of that is for AE fees?
I believe it's pegged at about 7.5%.
7.5. And then if we have an architect who starts now on I guess you'd call it a contingency basis, that the work is assigned, how then, if the bond passes, and if we go forward with the projects that they have sort of advanced us their fees on, how do you square that up?
There'll be, if let's say it's less than the 7.5%,
Right.
perhaps, that just goes towards perhaps additional projects. It just goes back into the bond.
Into the pot?
Into the pot, exactly.
Okay, so then if we have an architect, for instance, who expends, say, $5,000 worth of design time on a project, and then we finally get to the point where a bond passes and we're going to go forward with that, he's not going without that money. We're just making it up after the bond passes, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then if the bond doesn't pass, and for whatever reason we didn't go forward with a bond, do we have any obligation to that architect?
No.
And is that our same relationship with Plant Moran?
I believe that's, we're engaged up until the bond vote for architectural procurement.
Okay.
And other activities, but as far as the obligation to us, if the bond doesn't pass, that contract isn't enacted.
Is then void, okay. Yeah. Then as far as prepping I would recommend personally, I'd like to see us on these, the RFP that we're putting out to the architects, that you put your contract in there and tell them don't bid if this contract isn't okay. Because you could kill months and months and months going back and forth, as you alluded to. And that can be they can put a gun to your head ultimately, because then you're in a position where, I've lost my potential contractors. So that's my thought on that. What else do I have here? Conditional on bidding. That's it. Thank you very much.
Also, while you were asking questions, one of the other things that I've seen in the past is that if the firm is not quite big enough or they are too busy, a lot of times you'll get multiple architects under one contract. And so we talked a little bit about, who would fit into that kind of category, and then who would fit into that category that has plenty of manpower and plenty of energy to be able to make that go. And if he talked about 8 or 10 that are possibly going to be looking at this, probably you got 4 that take off, and this is not an issue, not a problem. And then your other 4 to 5 to 6 will be people that could be looking for partners in order to be able to establish the manpower that's going to be needed to get this accomplished. So I think to answer your question, 1, 2, or 3, or could be that under one contract as well.
I think whatever direction you decide to do as far as putting them under one umbrella or not, I think because you're going to have so much planning going on concurrently, we would be best to have multiple firms involved. I don't know that you want to have multiple firms in the same building, because then your staging becomes an issue, but
correct.
You've been doing this long enough, I don't need to tell you how to do it. So, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Profeta?
Well, I just want to thank you guys for coming here and giving us these updates every now and then about where we are in the planning process, because I know that we worked hard with the community to put together this plan for projects by building that's posted online, and now listening to you answer Mr. Ishmael's questions, it seems that we've got a pretty detailed plan in place now should the bond pass, so that's refreshing and comforting to hear.
Thank you.